Hello, awesome healers. Today's topic is all about your DNA. And it's not what you think. DNA is just not about your eye color or your height or your skin color, but you have a programmable portion of your DNA. And this has come to light in the last 10-15 years in the scientific community, and it's called epigenetics. So today I'm going to talk about what poverty and your epigenetics might have to do with one another and what you can do to change that. Okay, stay tuned to hear more. This is Anastasia. I used to be a physics professor specializing in vibrational and quantum physics. After recovering from a serious illness using energy healing on myself, the calling to heal became so strong that I had to quit my 40-year research career. I replaced my 6-figure professor's salary within 5 months using a simple but not easy 3-step system that I worked out to grow my healing practice. Now I help other healers grow their practices, whether they're just starting or already have a practice, with this same 3-step system. I'm all about helping you too. Listen in to learn more. Thank you so much for coming back. I'm so happy you're here. And as I said, today's topic is all about your DNA. So when biologists first discovered the human genome and DNA, they knew that it was an important component in a cell. And when they finally sequenced it, they discovered that in the human DNA, only 5% of the protein, or 5% of your DNA, actually sequences proteins. And the way it works is kind of interesting, but you know what a DNA looks like. It's like this twisted ladder, right? And there are actually 3 billion base pairs, meaning there's 3 billion rungs on the ladder, meaning there's 1 billion words that sequence proteins, because it takes 3 of the sequencing, 3 of the rungs in the ladder to actually uniquely define an amino acid. And since there's 21 amino acids, it takes 3 of these sequenced, 3 of these rungs of ladders. I'm not explaining it very well, but I'm trying to do it in a really simple way so you get it. And only 5% of the human genome actually sequences proteins. So the biologists thought, oh, well, the rest of the DNA doesn't do anything. So they called it junk DNA. And they discovered that there were some plants that use 95% of their DNA to sequence proteins, and only 5% they didn't know what it was all about. And it's come to light that when you look at a DNA, that the crossbars has something called methylation. It's kind of like an on and off switch. And if something is, let's say it's methylated, the gene is active, and if it is not, it's off. So it's kind of like ones and zeros. So these bits and pieces of your DNA can be either activated or deactivated, or on and off, or ones and zeros. And if you look really closely at a DNA and compare it to a computer chip, they look really, really similar. And so that's where all that programming comes from. And I said all that to say this. So in twins, for example, there have been a number of twin studies that have shown that twins that were raised in completely separate environments end up, meaning identical twins and not just fraternal twins, but twins that have the exact same genome, that they have really similar likes and dislikes. These are not physical traits, but they are kind of like emotional traits or tendencies. So this, they've also noticed, for example, in some animals like cats that are out in the wild become feral, and it takes up to 7 generations for that feral behavior to be bred out of them. So that means, and I'll bring up some more some more evidence that shows that this is the case, right? So that means that the behavior of the cats carried through from generation to generation until it finally eased out. And so you might think, well, gee, if I behave like my family members do, which you tend to do, and they all have this poverty mindset, right, then I will inherit this poverty mindset. The same goes with people that have a lot of criminality in their background, like, aunts and uncles and cousins and siblings end up in jail or end up in trouble with the law. So you have this lack of following the law gene, right? Criminality. And you think that you're stuck. But fortunately, you're not, because DNA can be reprogrammed in your lifetime, and it can be done actually very quickly. So one of the ways that we know DNA gets reprogrammed is that if you are in, for example, a healthy, happy, loving relationship, that helps extend the lives of both partners. And that's because relationship is like the number one factor out of 8 factors, the number one factor that promotes longevity, healthy living, and even wealth. So there are ways to decrease your lifetime, let's say within this happy marriage, by eating the wrong thing, by drinking a lot of alcohol, taking recreational drugs, staying up till all hours, running yourself ragged, living a stressed life. So now you're reprogramming your epigenetic programming to cut your life short, because that's a pretty miserable life. Every time you make a move towards trashing your health, let's say, every time you make a move, let's say you're smoking cigarettes a lot, and you all know that cigarettes are very unhealthy, and it's one of the toughest habits to quit. I know, because I have a friend that was addicted to everything because he had a very bad case of fibromyalgia, and that helped take his mind off of it. And cigarettes was the hardest thing for him to quit. He quit drinking alcohol, he quit drugs, he quit everything. And it was still the hardest thing for him to quit. But he managed to do it a couple of times. So every time you do something unhealthy, you are signaling your genes, I don't want to be here anymore. I would rather not be alive. And if you are, sleeping well, eating a healthy diet, being really careful, minimizing the amount of medicines and drugs and chemicals that go in your body, you are telling your body you want to live longer, right? So, and it's just like being in a happy marriage. You're telling your body, I love it here. I have this great partner, and I actually love living in this house because I grew up here, and I love this neighborhood, and I love the home, and I am in a great partnership. So my body is telling me, yes, I want to be here, right? And so this is what reprograms you, and that can be reprogrammed actually fairly quickly. It might take a decade, but it can be reprogrammed fairly quickly without any energy healing intervention or any quantum field intervention. But in energy healing, we can reprogram that very quickly, and there are a number of ways to do it. So I just wanted to let you know that a lot of times this poverty thinking is from generations of squeezing really tight on your purse strings. My family, for example, my parents lived through the the Depression during the war. My mom was in Greece when World War II came around. She was born in 1932, so she was like 10 years old or so, and Germany occupied Greece, and there was no food left, and they had to house a German soldier in each house, and all the men were taken away. So, they had some really tough experiences, and it's not that the German soldiers were any better, because my former father-in-law lived part of the war in Greece, and they didn't have anything to eat either. So they got really skinny, and they formed friendships with the Greeks. So, they all went through a really tough time. And so then when I was growing up, every piece of cloth that you ever used, so let's say you had a set of sheets and then they started to wear out in the middle, then you would cut them up and make something else out of the good parts of the cloth. And then when that part got worn out, you would cut them up again until finally you had scraps. So you remember all those quilts where you had little scraps of cloth to make quilt? You didn't have to go buy them. You actually had them, and all of your shirts and your dresses and everything that got worn out and had holes in places, they took the good pieces that were left over and made blankets out of them. Right? So that was their thinking. Don't waste a single thing. And when I moved in here, and this is where you get kind of like that poverty thinking gene, when I moved in here and I opened up, my dad had 2 junk drawers. And I went through and I sorted everything one by one by one, and I ended up with 2 big jars full of screws. Said to my husband, I think my dad never met a screw he didn't keep. And then I went through, they had a nice new vanity in their bathroom. I guess it's maybe 10 years old by now. And I opened up and cleared out the drawers in the vanity, and there was another jar of screws. And then in the garage, he has this wall of storage cabinets and workbench. And in 2 or 3 of the drawers, they're just so heavy you can barely open them, and they're full of screws. So this is kind of like that stingy thinking that they couldn't do that. And that's passed down in your DNA. And one of my brothers got it really badly. And we used to make fun of him being so stingy. He would always tell us, oh, I got this at a garage sale. It was 50 cents. Do you like my shirt? And so you have to grow out of it. And fortunately, that kind of stingy, grasping thinking is relatively easy to grow out of once you know how to reprogram your genes. And it all involves taking that first step out of being that stingy, like start sorting and tossing and doing kind of like the Marie Kondo, that thinking of, do I love it? Do I need it? And if I don't, can I let someone else enjoy it now? Or is it so old and so out of style and so damaged that I can finally throw it away or recycle it if it is something recyclable, right? And that's like a first step. And then the other is to reprogram your genes. And there is a process that I use to reprogram genes and help release that. And it all comes from the pineal gland. The pineal gland is right above the brainstem, and it is what's called the seat of the soul. And by pulling the DNA out of that and reprogramming it and releasing all of the poverty mindset parts of you that you have inherited from your family and you have actually watched that behavior over the years, can help you let all that go. So let's take a deep breath. And as you release it, imagine all of that poverty mindset being released out of your body, and open up yourself, right? Just like I mentioned before, as you open up your energy field to invite more in, as you release. And here's something that someone told me: if you hang on to everything so tightly, your hands will be full and there's no place for God to put the gifts that were meant for you into them, right? So I'll leave you with that. So I hope that was helpful about your DNA being programmable like a computer chip, and it's 95% of your DNA. Remember, only 5% sequences it. And that is not junk. That is you. That's your personality, the traits you inherited from your family, and probably something that you really want, a lot of it you really want to keep. Okay, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for taking valuable time out of your day to listen in. If you found this message helpful, please help spread the word by giving the broadcast a thumbs up or a 5-star rating. Share it with your friends and be sure to subscribe to my channel with your notifications on. For further training on healing and growing your healing business using my 3-step system, go to www.highpaidhealers.com. And I'll see you in the next video.